Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning, and every dollar in your wallet has mysteriously lost 10% of its value overnight. Your savings account that had $10,000 yesterday now buys what $9,000 used to buy. Your paycheck that covered your expenses last month suddenly falls short. You'd be outraged, wouldn't you? You'd demand answers. You'd want to know who stole your money. But here's the thing. This isn't happening overnight. It's happening right now, today, this very moment, and it's been happening for decades. The theft is so gradual, so carefully orchestrated, that most people never even notice it's occurring. They call it inflation, and they tell you it's natural, inevitable, even healthy for the economy. But what they don't tell you is that inflation is the most sophisticated tax collection system ever devised. One that operates without legislation, without voter approval, and without your consent. Every government in history has faced the same fundamental problem. They need money to operate, to fight wars, to build monuments, to maintain power. But there's a limit to how much they can extract through direct taxation before people revolt. Push too hard with income taxes, property taxes, or sales taxes, and citizens start demanding accountability. They want to know where their money is going. They want representation. They get angry. So governments discovered something far more elegant. Instead of taking your money directly, they found a way to make your money worth less while keeping the same numbers on your bank statements. It's the perfect crime because the victim doesn't even realize they're being robbed. The story begins thousands of years ago with the first coins ever minted. Ancient kings quickly learned that they could stretch their budgets by mixing cheaper metals into gold and silver coins. A coin that was supposed to be pure gold became 90% gold, then 80%, then 50%. The face value remained the same, but the real value plummeted. Merchants started demanding more coins for the same goods because they knew the coins contained less precious metal. Prices rose across the empire, and the king could fund his armies and palaces with the difference. This wasn't an accident or a side effect. It was deliberate policy. The Roman Empire perfected this technique over centuries. Emperor after emperor debased the currency to fund their ambitions. The silver denarius, once nearly pure, eventually became mostly copper, with just a thin wash of silver on the surface. Citizens watched their savings evaporate as prices for bread, wine, and basic goods climbed higher and higher. But the emperors could continue their wars, their building projects, their lavish lifestyles, all funded by this invisible tax on every person holding Roman coins. The pattern was set: debase the currency, extract wealth from the population, maintain power, and this pattern has repeated in every civilization since, only growing more sophisticated with time. Jump forward to medieval Europe, where monarchs faced constant pressure to fund their wars and courts. Direct taxation was politically dangerous and logistically difficult in a feudal system. But currency manipulation offered an elegant solution. English kings routinely recalled all silver coins, melted them down, and reissued them with less silver content. French monarchs did the same. Spanish rulers discovered they could simply declare that their coins were worth more than they had been the day before. The result was always the same. Merchants raised prices to compensate for the reduced value of the currency. Common people found their wages bought less food, less clothing, less of everything they needed to survive. But the kings had successfully transferred wealth from their subjects to their treasuries without passing a single tax law. By the time we reached the modern era, governments had learned to make this process even more invisible. No more obvious mixing of metals or recalling of coins. Instead, they created central banks and printing presses. They developed economic theories that made inflation sound not just acceptable, but beneficial. They convinced entire populations that a little bit of inflation was actually good for everyone. The mechanics became more complex, but the fundamental operation remained identical. Create more money than the economy can absorb, watch prices rise, and capture the difference between what citizens had yesterday and what they can afford today. The only difference is that modern governments can execute this extraction on a scale that ancient emperors could never have imagined. Today's inflation operates through a web of central banks, government bonds, monetary policy, and financial institutions that most people find impossible to understand. This complexity isn't accidental. It's designed to obscure what's actually happening. When prices rise, politicians blame supply chains, corporate greed, foreign wars, or natural disasters. Rarely do they acknowledge the role of monetary expansion in driving those price increases. The Federal Reserve creates trillions of dollars out of thin air, injecting them into the financial system through various mechanisms. Those newly created dollars don't appear in your bank account. They flow first to banks, to government contractors, to financial institutions, and to those closest to the money creation process. By the time that new money reaches ordinary citizens through wages or spending, prices have already begun to rise. This creates a transfer of purchasing power from those who receive the new money last to those who receive it first. It's a tax that hits hardest on savers, on people living on fixed incomes, on anyone who doesn't own assets that rise with inflation. It's a tax that disproportionately benefits borrowers, asset owners, and those connected to the financial system. The genius of this system is that it appears to be a natural economic phenomenon rather than a deliberate policy choice. When citizens see prices rising at the grocery store, they don't think about monetary policy or central bank operations. They see corporations raising prices and assume it's greed. They see shortages and assume it's supply problems. They see their paychecks failing to keep pace and assume it's their employer's fault. The real culprit remains hidden behind layers of complexity and economic jargon that make it nearly impossible for ordinary people to trace the connection between money creation and their declining purchasing power. This misdirection is intentional. Governments and central banks employ armies of economists and public relations specialists to frame inflation as anything other than what it actually is. They create elaborate theories about wage price spirals, supply and demand imbalances, and consumer psychology. They publish reports filled with charts and statistics that make the process appear scientific and inevitable rather than engineered and controlled. But strip away the academic language and sophisticated models, and you find the same basic operation that Roman emperors used 2,000 years ago. Take value from the currency holders and transfer it to the currency issuers. The method has evolved, but the mechanism remains unchanged. Consider what happens during periods of rapid inflation. Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Weimar Germany. In each case, governments faced fiscal crises and chose to solve them by creating massive amounts of new money. The results were catastrophic for ordinary citizens, but highly beneficial for those in power who could spend the new money before prices adjusted. In Venezuela, the government printed bolivars to fund social programs and maintain political control. Prices soared, savings were wiped out, and millions of people fled the country. But the government officials and their allies who received the newly printed money first were able to convert it into foreign currencies and real assets before hyperinflation destroyed the bolivar's value. Zimbabwe's government printed money to fund land redistribution and pay government salaries. The Zimbabwe dollar became so worthless that people abandoned it entirely using foreign currencies for actual transactions. Yet the political elite who controlled the printing process accumulated vast wealth, while ordinary Zimbabweans saw their life savings become literally worthless. Even in developed countries with supposedly stable currencies, the pattern operates continuously at a more subtle level. The United States has increased its money supply by over 400% since the year 2000. That expansion didn't happen by accident. It was deliberate policy designed to fund government operations, bail out financial institutions, and stimulate economic activity. Each dollar created reduces the value of every dollar already in existence. It's simple mathematics. If there are $100 in circulation and you create 10 more, each dollar is now worth roughly 9% less than it was before. The people holding those original $100 have been taxed without their knowledge or consent. This hidden taxation explains why wages seem to buy less each year despite nominal increases. It explains why a house that cost $20,000 in 1970 now costs $200,000 or more. It explains why college tuition, healthcare, and basic necessities consume an ever larger share of household budgets. The numbers on your paycheck might be higher than your parents earned, but the purchasing power behind those numbers has been systematically extracted. The most insidious aspect of this system is how it punishes exactly the behaviors that governments claim to encourage. Save money for retirement? Inflation eats away at those savings year after year. Build up an emergency fund? Its value diminishes while it sits in your account. Live within your means and avoid debt? You're penalized while borrowers see their obligations reduced by inflation. Meanwhile, those who understand the system profit enormously. Real estate investors, stock market participants, and holders of physical assets see their wealth grow as newly created money flows into these markets. The inflation that destroys the purchasing power of cash simultaneously inflates the prices of everything else. It's a massive wealth transfer from savers to speculators, from the financially naive to the financially sophisticated. This creates a two-tier system where knowledge of how money actually works becomes the dividing line between prosperity and struggle. Those who recognize inflation for what it is can position themselves to benefit from it. Those who trust government assurances about price stability find themselves steadily impoverished by forces they don't understand. The tragedy is that most people work their entire lives under this system without ever realizing they're being systematically robbed. They attribute their financial struggles to personal failings, bad luck, or economic forces beyond anyone's control. They never connect their difficulties to deliberate policy decisions made in central bank boardrooms and government offices. Understanding this history changes everything about how you view your financial situation and your relationship with government institutions. How you view your financial situation and your relationship with government institutions. From the clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia to the digital ledgers of modern central banks, the story remains unchanged. Governments have always found ways to extract wealth from their citizens without calling it taxation. The methods have grown more sophisticated, the language more complex, the mechanisms more obscured, but the fundamental operation continues unchanged. Your purchasing power is being quietly transferred to those who control the money supply. The choice before you is simple. You can continue to accept the official explanations, trust that inflation is natural and beneficial, and watch your wealth slowly disappear. Or you can recognize this system for what it actually is and position yourself accordingly. Those who understand history are not doomed to repeat its mistakes. Those who understand money are not condemned to be victims of its manipulation. The emperors who debased Roman coins are gone. The kings who recalled medieval silver are dead. But their playbook lives on, executed by modern institutions with the same goals and the same disregard for the people whose wealth they quietly confiscate. The only difference is whether you see it happening. If this opened your eyes to how the system actually works, hit subscribe. The patterns are all there in the historical record, waiting for those willing to look.